Hello, I'm Stephen Childs of virtualvoicelessons.net, and this is our introduction to contemporary voice lessons. What I would like to do today is to briefly go over some of the key areas that we will be covering in future lessons and give you a basic understanding of how they all tie in together. Some of the subjects we will look at are breathing, vocal tone, and English phonetics. But let's first take a look at a very important initial subject when it comes to voice training, which is the standards within style. Let me ask you kind of a funny question. Would you ever consider, even for a moment, going to a foot doctor to help you with a toothache? Or how about seeing your local vet to help you with your poor eyesight? I do not believe that anyone would ever consider doing these things because, quite frankly, you could be the best podiatrist in the world, but that does not qualify you to work with an abscessed tooth. You could be the most respected veterinarian of all time, but that does not qualify you to give me the correct prescription for my reading glasses. Now, the reason is obvious. The standards of medicine are radically different from one medical practice to another. Isn't it true that we don't even like to take our children to our grown-up doctor until they reach a certain age? We take them to a qualified pediatrician because they adhere to a different set of standards. Your family doctor may prescribe 2 pills for your infection, where your infant may only get half of a pill, and so on. The standards within those styles of medicine differ for each person's needs, and the same is true of voice training. Throughout my years as a voice instructor, I've heard all kinds of different approaches to voice training, especially from students who came to me from other voice teachers. What I've come to realize is that there really is no clear standard on the correct approach towards voice training itself. Many teachers may use the same terminologies, but often have vastly different opinions on what those terms mean. Even just the style of singing can be very confusing. For instance, many times I have heard students complain to me that their last trainer was teaching them operatic arias and other classical vocal works, ensuring them that this would help them sound like their favorite pop or rock singer. Yet all too often the student was still not able to achieve the same sound and flair they were longing for, and then lose the ambitions they once had to do so. And often I found myself asking them, what in the world does operatic singing have to do with contemporary singing? The answer is obvious. Very little. You see, just because someone says they are a voice trainer doesn't mean they are qualified to train your particular style of voice. We here at virtualvoicelessons.net proudly train the contemporary style of singing, and it is our profound belief that this style has its own challenges and concepts that are not found within the art of classical singing. So let's take a moment to define exactly what contemporary singing is. So what is the true definition of contemporary voice? Well, contemporary voice can simply be defined as singing that is based around the natural speaking voice. Now, most operatic trainers will tell you that classical singing is completely based off the speaking voice as well. But I challenge them to show me anyone who talks the way a classical singer sings. If they could, that person would certainly have a completely over-exaggerated, almost comical sound to their speaking voice, which would be far darker in tonality than what we regard as normal speech. On the other hand, let's ask the same question as it relates to contemporary singing. Country singers, for instance, have a very southern accented, down-to-earth sound to their voice, whereas rock singers may have a very aggressive or angry sound to theirs. Both can be accurately described as speech-related styles. After all, how do we recognize anger in a singer's voice? We compare it to what we all know and have understood since childhood. It sounds like angry speech. And how again does country singing sound country? Because of an accent? That again shows speech. And this is one of the core differences between the two main styles of singing. And I do want to stress, two styles of singing because contemporary voice is pop singing, it is rock singing, it is country singing. It is all the basic styles of voice except for one, classical. Classical singers are devoid of these differences because to be different in classical singing means that you're doing something wrong. This is why every operatic singer sounds like every operatic singer. It is a never-changing art, always the same, because to change means that it would cease to be classical, which by definition means of the past. So now that we have defined our diverse style of voice, let's take a look at some of the technical areas within contemporary voice that we will need to understand in order to fully develop our own singing voices. Any voice instructor will tell you that breathing is a huge part of developing the singing voice. And with this, I fully agree. And correct inhalation and exhalation is one of the few subjects that contemporary and classical singing have in common. In fact, this may be the one area where classical trainers shine above most contemporary trainers because too many contemporary trainers allow their students to get away with far too much when it comes to the art of breathing. To be strict in this area is a good thing, and it is my hope that you too will be strict on yourself when it comes to developing correct breathing habits. Now, although we cannot cover this subject fully in this lesson, I would like to mention that we have several video lessons that cover this subject in great detail, and I encourage you to go through the entire series with us as part of your development as a singer. The full study of correct breathing can be the single most important element in developing your voice to its fullest potential. Good singing always starts with correct breathing. I mean, think about it. What makes the voice come out of our mouth to begin with? Is it magic? No, obviously it is air. But in order to exhale properly, which is what singing is all about, we must first inhale correctly. Now, within singing, there are actually two different ways in which we can inhale correctly. The first is commonly referred to as diaphragmatic breathing, and the second is intercostal breathing. Now, we will only cover the first type of inhalation today because although intercostal breathing gives us greater strength in our singing voice, it is far more difficult to master. You see, to achieve intercostal breathing as a habit, we must have the foundational breathing style mastered first, which is diaphragmatic breathing. Now, contrary to common belief, no matter what style of inhalation we use, we are in fact using our diaphragm. What we want to do is to use the diaphragm efficiently. And the way to use the diaphragm in the most efficient manner is to allow it to drop downwards. And here again, I want to stress a particular word, the word being allow. You see, the body wants to inhale correctly in the most efficient manner possible, but through developed poor habits, we inhibit the body from doing so. What we must do is allow the stomach to drop downwards when we take in our breaths. The reason for this is that our diaphragm is a huge sheet of muscle that actually drops downward and draws the air into the lungs. But if we don't allow the stomach to drop along with the diaphragm, this huge sheet of muscle has nowhere to go and becomes, in essence, stuck. Again, we have to allow the stomach to fall downwards, out of the way, so that the diaphragm has room to do its job, which is to drop downwards and suck the air into our lungs. Now, what we do with the air is the next big issue. And it is my opinion that this is where many voice instructors are letting their students down by either underemphasizing the subject or ignoring it altogether. Just because we may inhale correctly does not mean that we will necessarily exhale correctly. It is true that we greatly reduce our ability to create strength behind the voice if we inhale wrong. But if we don't know what to do with this perfect breath, the end result will be the same. We will wind up with a strained voice that is devoid of control and power. What we need to do is create an internal pressure behind the vocal cords by squeezing the muscles around our midsection. It's very similar to shooting a cube of ice from a tight grip between our fingers. Now, the problem that most of us have as singers is instead of steadily pushing the air sound out of our mouths, we instead flex the muscles of our midsection, causing straining. In fact, we will spend much time in your upcoming lessons discovering the difference between pushing and flexing. Now, a quick way to develop the feeling of pushing is to place your folded hands directly below your belly button and to burst the word, "Hey!" When you do this, you will notice that your abdomen will pop out. Now the next big step is to hold that hey, like this. Hey! Hey! Now please remember, this is not a shouting contest. You do not have to be overly loud when performing this hey sound. It is only meant for you to develop the feeling of what pushing is. Once you have the feel, apply it to your singing voice. Take in a breath by allowing the lower part of your stomach to drop downwards and then push from that area below your belly button. You want to maintain that pressure throughout your vocal phrase. One area of singing that truly distinguishes one style of voice from another is undoubtedly the subject of vocal tone. In fact, it is the difference of tone that separates the classical approach from the contemporary approach more than any other stylistic choice and has been the cause of debate amongst vocal masters for decades. So what is vocal tone? It is what we usually refer to as the sound of one's voice. A more detailed description of tone is that tone is the quality and character of sound. Now, the character of sound has a lot to do with the emotions that it elicits. Rock singers having an angry sound to their voices, for instance, is an example of the character of tone. In operatic voice, the character of their tone is usually very dramatic and classical sounding, evoking emotions of an ancient yet angelic flavor. Now, the quality side to vocal tone is a little easier to describe in absolute terms. It mainly has to do with the color of one's tone. In other words, it has a brightness to the tone as well as a dark side to the tone. Or as we say within the field of recording engineering, the tone consists of treble and bass frequencies. Now again, all of this is described in greater detail in your upcoming lessons, but I just want to address it briefly now so that you can start analyzing the difference within a singer's tonal style and hopefully apply its principles to your own voice. Achieving a darker, fuller sound to the voice is a goal for both contemporary and classical singers, along with the means to do so. But the difference between the two lies in the amount. Classical singers use a much darker tonality than contemporary singers, and is probably the best known feature of a classical voice. Even styles related to operatic voice, such as musical theater singing, generally use far less darkening. The amount of darkening really is what can shape someone's tone to fit with any of the sub-styles of voice. In other words, it is the coloring of the tone that makes it unique. Now generally, the way that we darken our tone is to open up the throat, as if we're going to yawn. As you can see, the more we open the throat up, the darker the tone becomes. Now, the general rule of thumb is, the higher we sing, the more and more we need to open, just to keep the vocal tone sounding the same. To the listener, nothing has changed. But in actuality, a well-trained singer is constantly adjusting his or her throat opening according to how high or low the phrase becomes. Now, the piercing or bright sound of the tone is where contemporary voice differs dramatically from the classical approach. In fact, it is completely the opposite. This has to do with where we are concentrating the voice within the mouth. In classical voice, the singer's goal is to actually aim the voice in the mask, as they call it, which is this area. By doing so, the resonators in the face are fired, causing a ring in the tone. But the only negative is that by aiming the voice in the front of the face causes a dampened nasalness in the singer's tone. But all in all, this is the sound that we all recognize as a classical singer's tone. And again, is where the two styles differ from one another. You see, in contemporary voice, we aim the voice in the complete opposite direction, which is in the back of the mouth or hard palate. By sending the voice here at all times, we create a high-pitched ring, but without the nasal sound. And this is exactly what we want to do and do when we speak, especially when we're trying to be heard, say in a crowded room, or when we're making a point to someone in an argument. And it is the meaning behind the phraseology when someone projects their voice. Now, this is the part of a contemporary singer's tone that is not shifting and changing. At least, that's the goal. We want to maintain this bright side of our tone no matter how high we sing, what vowel we are singing, how loud or soft we are singing, or whatever. We must keep the bright frequencies in our tone at all times, along with the darker frequencies, which again, needs constant adjusting in order to keep it sounding the same. Now, there are two other differences between the two major styles of voice, such as the vowels and consonants found within words. You know, it always struck me as kind of funny that a student who is interested in singing, say, rock or pop or country, R&B, or the such like, that are written in English, are singing classical pieces written in other languages such as Italian or German. In fact, many students go through rigorous training on the phonetics of these languages, but are usually never instructed at all on the phonetics of their own. This is the language that they are most likely going to be used in singing anyway. Some classical trainers that I have talked to on this subject actually insist that Italian and German are the foundation of our language, and therefore to learn them will help us improve singing our own. What a stretch of reasoning that is. Don't they know that some languages have vowels and consonants that we do not have in English and vice versa? Italian does not have the sound for instance. Instead of saying shut the door, you may hear someone with a thick Italian accent say shut the door. They will use instead of because they don't have this particular sound. So as you can see, the study of English phonetics is essential if someone is singing English-based songs. And there is no language that is so superior that to learn it will help with all other languages, including English. But this seems to be the theme within classical voice training as a whole. Some people believe that if you learn how to sing classically, you can sing anything. And it is with this belief that we strongly disagree. Contemporary voice has been looked down on for far too long, and it's about time that the world recognizes that singing has grown and improved dramatically over the years. Actually, it is with the invention of the microphone and amplification that we start to see a more speech-based singing style emerge, and it has been growing ever since. Singers like Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, Tony Bennett, Carrie Underwood, Ronnie James Dio, Christina Aguilera, Chris Cornell, and so on, have proven that contemporary singing is not an illegitimate vocal style as some would have us believe. It is contemporary voice that continues to grow and develop with each passing year. It is my deep hope that it will be you who takes this art form on to the next level of excellence and lights up the world with sounds of your own unique voice. I am Stephen Childs, and I would like to say thank you for listening, and God bless.